Just a gentle note before we begin. Today's episode includes discussion of anxiety, trauma, and mental health. Please listen in a way that feels supportive for you. You're welcome to pause and come back at any time. There's a moment a lot of caregivers know too well. You're in the appointment, you're on the phone with a service provider, or you're standing at a bedside and someone asks you a question and you had a plan. And suddenly your mind goes blank. You start over-explaining. You go into nice mode so you don't upset anyone, and you feel your heart race. And you can't find the words until you're back in the car, replaying the whole conversation and thinking, I should have said. And the worst part is caregivers often blame themselves for that. They think it means they're not coping, they're not strong enough, or not organized enough. But so often it's not a character flaw, it's a nervous system response. Today's guest is here to explain what's happening in plain language and to offer micro tools that help caregivers feel steadier before, during, and after hard moments, without turning it into a performance or without needing to fix themselves. Craig Meriwether is a clinical hypnotherapist and medical hypnosis specialist with more than 16 years of experience helping people work with anxiety, fear, trauma, and self-doubt. He's supported a wide range of people, including veterans with PTSD, cancer patients managing pain, students with test anxiety, athletes, entrepreneurs, and everyday people navigating overwhelm. Craig also brings lived experience. He's spoken openly about his journey with depression and anxiety, and later being diagnosed with bipolar 2, and how hypnotherapy and NLP helped him regain calm and a sense of internal control. This episode is for the caregiver who is holding it together in hard rooms and wants a steadier inner foundation. Craig, welcome to Radiant Moments.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you giving me some time to talk with your audience and talk with you and have this discussion. It's an extraordinary work to be a caregiver and kind of unsung, as you all know. It's a lot of work and very taxing on the nervous system. So, talk a little bit. I also want to give at least one or two quick tools that people can use during their day, maybe multiple times a day, just in 5-6 minutes to help kind of reset yourself. But thank you for having me on the show.
I'm really grateful you're here. And before we get into that nervous system piece and the practical tools for caregivers in hard rooms, I'd love to help our listeners place you and your work into context. Craig, for anyone meeting you for the first time, can you share a little bit about what brought you into the work and, in simple grounded language, what you helped people change when anxiety, fear, and self-doubt struck?
My own healing led me to this work and wanting to do this work. I struggled a lot with depression and anxiety as a teenager specifically, and this is 1980s, and there's no internet and there's no SSRI drugs like Prozac, and it's really just whatever talk therapist you could find in the phone book, if people remember the phone book and the yellow pages or the white pages, and trying to find somebody's phone number. And, a 14-year-old kid, a 15-year-old kid is not going to do that or look for a book at the library or the bookstore. And so it's something I just kind of struggled with and just assumed that this is the way people are and the way I'm going to be. But as I grew and matured and moved into my 20s, it's really something I decided I don't want to feel this way. I could see other people were happy. Other people were at peace and felt calm and enjoyed life. And it's like, I wanted that. In fact, I remember very clearly, you always ask that question in high school as a kid, what do you want to be when you grow up? Or what do you want to do after school or something? And the idea that always came to my head was I just want to be happy. What was important to me, not so much career, because you always say an astronaut, I don't know, rock star, or an actor or brain surgeon or something, but I just wanted to be happy. And so I spent, as I moved into my 20s and the 1990s, I really started investigating that part. And people may remember, if they're around at that time, it was kind of a second resurgence of the personal development movement. Tony Robbins was super popular. His book, Awaken the Giant Within, and Oprah started kind of pushing more positivity on her show. And Oprah became super big. And this kind of resurgence of like becoming your best self and developing into the person you want to become. And so I started following it because I thought maybe this might be the way. Internet starts kind of slowly churning out in the late 1990s, as does Prozac and things like this. So the discussion opens up. More information is available. And one of the things people were mentioning in articles and this new thing called blog posts and talks you could hear on certain radio stations and things Like they would list the 5 things you could do in the back of the book or the article or a blog post. They say 5 things to do to change your life. And one of them was always hypnotherapy as a way to just, in a safe and gentle way, access your subconscious mind and clear out maybe the old patterns, the old instructions that are maybe creating issues within the life, signals, warning signals like anxiety and fear in your life, clearing that out, or at least turning down the volume knob on that stuff. And so I was that and finding great healing in my own life. And again, this has kind of been a slow drip over the last 40 years. I'm going to turn 59 here in a little bit. And so there's been a slow drip since I was about 14 or 15. One of the things around this is like, oh, well, now that I've kind of created this, some deep healing in my life, and I've done so much research about depression and stuff, I kind of wrote a book about it, which led to being on telesummits, which then led to starting my own podcast. This is kind of slow drip to pivoting later in life to becoming a hypnotherapist and learning about this. It was then that I was diagnosed, not bipolar 2. I know I put that in, that was a mistake I made with an autocorrect. The Word document did for me. It's bipolar 1. And the kind of difference is that when I was 50 years old, I was diagnosed as that. So just not too long ago. And bipolar 2, that's the kind of famous one. That's the one that was known as manic depressive disorder, and where one pole is this manic, happy, blissful state of energy and life and fun, and the other state is depression. That's the 2 poles, depression and this manic joy and happiness. That's bipolar 2. Bipolar 1, which is what I have, is there's 2 poles, but one pole is depression, the other pole is anxiety. And you kind of vacillate between those 2, and hence kind of this focus I've had for most of my life of trying to figure out how to deal with that. One of the things I learned how to manage and deal with and release a lot of the hurt and pain I've gone through is using these techniques under the umbrella term of hypnotherapy. And that's, a conversation to have it, the misconceptions and myths that unfortunately follow hypnotherapy around. It's not mind control. It's not brainwashing. It's not turning people into zombies or anything like this. It's a way of accessing your subconscious mind to create healing, moving forward with confidence and strength and power. Because in and of itself, you're kind of already hypnotizing yourself on a pretty regular basis, if not daily basis. That's why people feel anxious around issues or fear or anger, because you've programmed yourself, maybe unconsciously, maybe through trauma recently, or maybe when you were a kid. And so a lot of this work is kind of reverse engineering all that, dehypnotizing you from the automatic reactions of maybe anxiety or fear or anger or resentment, finding ways of healing an exhausted nervous system, even turning down the pain signals, physical pain signals somebody may be getting from chronic pain. And so it's basically tapping into the placebo effect. Amazing, but kind of maybe a long conversation, but the placebo effect, mind healing the body, maybe even emotional or mindset healings. And we know that happens because they have to account for that in the research, like a pharmaceutical company does. If they're doing medication, let's say about high blood pressure, half the group is going to get a sugar pill because they know mind will heal the body. They're going to influence those people unbeknownst to them, maybe through the information. They're putting out the brochure about this new study that they're doing, about the new medication, whatever the website says, the waiver they need to sign, the way the office looks, the way the office smells, the way the research lab people are wearing white coats. This is all influencing people unconsciously to heal themselves. They have to account for that in their research. So half the group's going to get the sugar pill, the other half's going to get the real medication. Let's say 30% of the people get better on the sugar pill. They're literally healing their own bodies. Well, let's say 40% of the people get better on the real medication. Well, they actually have to subtract 30% now because maybe they've influenced them with the brochure and the website and the waiver and the white lab coats to also heal themselves. And the medication actually didn't have anything to do with it. Well, 10% got better and that's good enough. And they'll put it on the market for whatever, $80 a pill. Well, more people got better through mind than they did through the actual medication. But there's no big billion-dollar payoff teaching people how to tap into their own healing power, the placebo effect. So in fact, Dr. Irving Kirsch calls hypnosis or hypnotherapy, calls it a non-deceptive placebo, because we're not going to trick you into doing this. We're going to do it on purpose. And again, a lot of it's just you're doing it already because a lot of people feel out of control with the anxiety or the anger or the resentment or the overwhelm or whatever the issue may be. So, and it's not to say it was your fault or that it should have happened, and it may even happened unconsciously, traumatic as a child. That shouldn't have happened. But with those instructions placed within the filing cabinet in the top drawer of the filing cabinet of the subconscious mind to watch out for any new emergency or hurt or pain that may be coming to protect you and keep you safe. Those instructions were put in there by you. Yeah, maybe unconsciously as a child who's going through a painful, hurtful experience, traumatic experience. But that becomes empowering because, well, if you're the one who put it in there, you're the one who can change them and take it out. And that's where hypnotherapy comes in because they're going to do it on purpose. You already know you can do it because here we are talking about this. You're listening to this podcast. And so there may be some issues going on. Well, you can change that. You're allowed to. It may be necessary to change the situation you may find yourself in at the moment. And it's certainly not a magic wand, but it's a way of this umbrella. We're in hypnotherapy, an umbrella of different techniques and tools to help you manage your nervous system and release and let go of any hurt or pain that may be preventing you from living your best life.
Thank you for sharing so openly, Craig. And just a gentle note for listeners, everyone's support needs are different, and today's conversation is educational, not medical advice. For the caregiver who's curious but cautious, what's the simplest way you describe what hypnosis is and what it isn't?
Yeah, unfortunately, there's a lot of misconceptions and a lot of myths, mostly created around TV and movies and the pocket watch that you got to move in front of people. And it's really unfortunate because I think it keeps a lot of people from this work that's so important. And really, it's really about brainwave state. And there are some people who say, well, I've tried hypnosis, Stephen, and I can't be hypnotized, or I hear only, that 20% of people can't be hypnotized. That's not a thing. We're all able to do this work because it's just moving down into the alpha brainwave state. Basically, the biology of the brain is that when you're in the present moment, focused on the task at hand, you're firing about 18, 20 cycles per second in terms of how fast the neurons in your brain are firing their little electrical signals to each other. It's processing information, keeping you in this conscious level of awareness in the present moment. When your mind drifts off, boring meeting at work, maybe remember back in school, and your mind drifts off because the class was boring, the lecturer was boring. You're watching TV and your mind drifts off. You start thinking about, I got people coming over this weekend, or I got that report due on Monday, or I got the big appointment coming up next Wednesday. You start thinking about something else. Maybe you're driving. You don't remember the last minute or two because you start thinking about something else. And then you find yourself at the store, at work, in your driveway, or in your garage or something, where your mind just drifted off into the alpha brainwave state. And literally the biology of it is just slowing down how it's processing information. So you went from 18, 20 cycles per second in the beta brainwave state to about 12 cycles in the alpha brainwave state. Maybe you're sitting at home or maybe back in school, and you move into that more hazy state of mind, that altered state of consciousness known as the theta brainwave state. You're not really awake, but you're not really asleep. Of course, you experience this at least twice a day when you're falling asleep and waking up. The theta brainwave state, you're about 6 cycles per second. Sleep is 1.5 cycles per second. So you're continuously altering your state of consciousness all day long. Usually because you're bored, your mind drifts off, you start thinking about something else, standing in line at the store, and your mind starts thinking about something else. You're hypnotizing yourself to a certain extent. And really, it's nothing about control. It's nothing about brainwashing or turning people into zombies or Manchurian candidates or whatever. It's really about taking back control, because a lot of people who come to this work feel out of control already. They have maybe a chronic anxiety or anger or resentment, or feel that there's trauma. Maybe they know exactly what the trauma is. Maybe it's unknown to them, but they just get a sense something happened that they need to release and let go of. Those people are already out of control in a certain sense because they're having these physical reactions of anxiety or sweaty palms or debilitating fear where they can't get out of bed. They're out of control. What this gives you is your control back. You're allowed to resolve that hurt. It's not that we're going to create amnesia or forgetfulness. It's about moving into a relaxed state, this daydreamy state, where you control the situation by releasing and letting go of what no longer serves you. Now, again, a lot of the people, they see the movies, they see TV shows, maybe those stage shows. Here in America, we have Las Vegas, and people go to these hypnosis shows, and people are doing funny things on stage. Maybe a comedy club, maybe seeing YouTube videos, and they're dancing like Michael Jackson, or they're singing like Elvis Presley, or they're quacking like ducks and barking like dogs. Understand that every single person up on that stage volunteered to be up there. Nobody made them get, well, maybe they lost a bet. I guarantee you, if they lost a bet and had to get up on stage because they lost a bet, they're going to be excused from the stage because they don't want to be up there. They're nervous. They're going to have stage fright maybe. And they're going to be deer in the headlights. That's not a good show. They're going to be, why don't you go sit back down and just pay for drinks or something. This work is about what you want to do. I can't make anybody do anything they don't want to do. One of the most famous things hypnosis is used for is quitting smoking cigarettes. I can't make people quit smoking just because I want them to. That'd make everybody a lot more healthy. I could go to bars, and at least in Las Vegas, they still smoke in bars and restaurants and casinos. I could go to every Las Vegas casino and just make people quit smoking. Everybody be healthier. I could go to prisons and hypnotize everybody to be law-abiding, upstanding citizens and shut down the prison system. I can hypnotize my way into the United Nations and hypnotize all the world leaders to create world peace. And I'd be that guy, the guy who created world peace through hypnosis. And they'd sing songs about me, and my birthday would be an international holiday. But I can't make people do things they don't want to do. So if you want to create healing in your life, that's right. If you want to get up on stage and act silly, you can do that. Maybe that's fun. That's not fun for me. I'm an introvert. I'm going to be hiding in the back in the shadows, sinking in my seat. And they're not going to pick me. They're going to pick the extrovert at the show who's jumping up and down saying, pick me, because they want to be up on stage. So this isn't about taking away control. It's about giving you back control. In fact, the word hypnosis comes from Greek mythology and the Greek god Hypnos, who is the Greek god of sleep. And back in the early 1800s, there's no fancy hospitals. There's no fancy anesthesia. And Dr. James Esdale was in India practicing as a surgeon. And back in those days, you have to have your leg amputated, you're biting down on a stick, or you're blow to the head to knock you unconscious. Well, he learned this deep trance state he could get people into. He put people so far into trance and looked like they're in a coma. And so that he could do amputation. He could cut people open and take out tumors and sew them up and deal with injuries and war wounds and all that kind of stuff. Well, he went back to England and he brought this technique with him. They started showing other people. Dr. James Bard started using it and wanting to refer to it in his writings and talking with his colleagues. He decided to name this coma-like state after the Greek god of sleep. So he called it hypnosis. Since then, in the last 50 years, this word has grown to encompass all sorts of altered states of consciousness, whether you're down in what's still called the Esdale state, that coma-like state, or just drifting off like you're bored watching a TV show in the high alpha brainwave state. All these kind of altered states of consciousness outside of the beta brainwave state is known as the hypnagogic trance state. And so in and of itself, it's nothing unusual. It's something you do every day. This isn't magic. It's not mysticism. It's a natural state that everybody can do because you do it every day. Now, if somebody's gone to a hypnosis appointment and it quote unquote didn't work, it's not because you can't do it. It's because you didn't want to do it. Maybe unconsciously, maybe through you didn't feel comfortable with the person or the place you're in, or I do most of my work over Zoom. You didn't feel comfortable with the Zoom call. Maybe there was a conscious or unconscious need to keep the issue. Maybe some sort of secondary gain. You feel that it's not the right time to release and let it go and do the healing work. So you didn't do the healing work. You were in control. And it's not that you can't do it, it's that you didn't want to do it. Again, maybe in an unconscious way, he didn't want to do it. But he didn't want to do it at that time in that manner. And so it proves the control of this. And it's just a natural state, a natural process of quieting down that conscious level of mind so you can access kind of that, if you will, the filing cabinet in the subconscious mind. And it's like, maybe it's time to clear out the top drawer of that filing cabinet of the hurt and pain, not to, again, create amnesia or forgetfulness, but release the hurt and pain of it. That may be causing the warning signals of fear and anxiety and anger to be at a very loud level.
That's such a powerful and simple desire. And I think a lot of caregivers relate to that, especially when life becomes all responsibility and no breathing room. What was it about hypnotherapy that made you think this might actually help, especially compared with everything else you'd tried?
It's a great question. And one of the aspects of this work is that I'm not here to fix anybody, and hypnotherapy in and of itself doesn't fix anybody. You fix yourself. Again, we're sort of going back to the placebo effect, the aspect that subconscious mind knows what the problem is. And more importantly, the subconscious mind knows what to do about it. A great example of this is a cut somebody gets on the index finger of their left hand. The subconscious mind doesn't send the emergency first aid to the pinky finger of the right hand. It knows where the problem is and knows what to do about it. If you ever had that experience, somebody comes and, hey, how'd you get that big scrape on your arm? You're like, what? I don't know what that is. The subconscious mind knew it was a problem, started the healing process before you were even consciously aware of it. Now, those are things, cuts on fingers, scrapes on arms, but you can maybe see when you apply it to a bigger aspect of mindset and emotional healing. Subconscious mind knows what's going on. It's very aware, yeah, unconsciously, behind that veil. It's running your immune system. It's running your digestive system. It's creating those killer T cells to help with illness and viruses and whatnot. Somebody's out in the snow skiing and they break their leg. Yes, they're going to go to the doctor. They're going to get a cast. But the cast isn't healing the leg. It's keeping it steady so the body heals the leg. And again, it's not sending the emergency first aid to the arm when the leg is broken. It knows what the problem is. So in terms of trauma, this is one of those aspects of subconscious mind that is so important and yet can be somewhat frustrating, in that subconscious mind's main job is to keep you safe and protected and for survival, which unfortunately doesn't necessarily mean your happiness and your success. It's for your safety, it's for your survival. Yes, it's running your immune system. Yes, it's running your digestive system, taking a day-old baby to that of an adult, growing your hair, growing your fingernails, all these things we don't have to think about. It's holding on to habits like tying your shoes and riding a bicycle and walking, zipping up your jacket, all these things, again, we don't have to think about. Its main job, though, is to keep you safe and protected, and it's doing so by using the events, situations, and circumstances of your life to filter your view of the world and your place in it. You're using what has happened in the past as a way to keep yourself safe in the moment, which sometimes may be frustrating for your future. You're the one who put all that stuff in there. And again, not to say it was your fault, and certainly it wasn't fair and it shouldn't have happened. And it's not to blame the victim. But what comes empowering is you're allowed to change that. You're in control of that. It's just sometimes it may be unknown because it's behind that veil of the subconscious mind. But when something feels dangerous in life, you're going to get the warning signals like somebody who pulls a fire alarm in a building. The sirens go off, the strobe lights go off, warning everybody that there's danger. Well, we also have a warning system, only it's the feeling state of anxiety, the feeling state of fear, anger, resentment, frustration, disappointment, warning you that there's danger in your world. But one of the issues of being a human being is that the mind can't tell the difference between what's real and what's imagined. And this is most noticeable if somebody's having a nightmare in the middle of the night. Now, maybe something very realistic, like a war veteran having a PTSD dream about being back in combat on the front lines, even though their war was 40 years ago. Maybe something super ridiculous, something super kind of silly and dumb, like a cheeseburger chasing down the street throwing coconuts at your head. That's pretty ridiculous. That's never going to happen. And yet your subconscious mind thinks you're under attack. Both situations, a person's safe and sound and cozy in bed. But in both scenarios, the subconscious mind thinks the person's under attack and in danger, and will turn on the stress response. Even in deep sleep, the brain creating adrenaline and cortisol, dumping in the bloodstream, the heart racing to get to the big muscle of your arms, to fight the big muscle of your legs, to escape, start breathing shallowly to get that oxygen to the big muscle. Immune system's turning down, the power of the digestive system turning down to get that energy to be able to. There may be so much cortisol in the brain that you wake up with the screams because your subconscious mind wants you physically awake to look for the danger, all because a cheeseburger is chasing down the street. Because it has this protocol of shoot first, ask questions later. So you can imagine what's happening in your waking world. That's what's possible when you're in deep sleep, in the delta brainwave state. And so that's the subconscious mind. It's a highly emotionalized mind that's there to keep you safe and protected. The conscious level of mind, that's the logical mind, the analytical mind, the part of mind that creates your goals and the plans to achieve those goals and the willpower to go after those goals, the plan for your week, the plan, your 5-year plan. Well, what neuroscience tells us is conscious mind only makes up 5% of mind. Subconscious mind makes up 95% of mind. So when there's conflict between the logical mind and the emotional mind wins every time. That's why a lot of this stuff doesn't have to make any sense. And that's why it can be somewhat frustrating at times to do something like talk therapy or some of the other therapies where it's like you're logically analyzing the situation with somebody else who's listening to you and analyzing logically the situation. And you're just spinning your wheels because it's not a logical problem. It's an emotional problem behind the veil of the unconscious mind in that filing cabinet there to keep you safe. Because something happened when you were a little kid that you didn't understand or was unsafe. And in that instant, or maybe over the course of years, you created a safety protocol on how to keep yourself safe. And maybe 5, 6, 7, 10 years old, that was the best thing to do to keep yourself safe, to hide, to keep your voice low, to keep yourself small. That doesn't work in your 20s, your 30s, your 60s, your 70s. But until you change those instructions, nothing's going to change. Sort of like computer programming. You can be mad all you want because your accounting program says 2 + 2 = 5. But it's not until you change the programming that things are going to change. And so that's the work of hypnotherapy. And it's not, again, that I fix anybody or that these techniques under the umbrella term hypnotherapy fix you. You fix yourself. And that becomes empowering. You have the control back. Because again, I want to make this perfectly clear. I'm not blaming anybody or blaming the victim or saying it was your fault or that it should have happened. It's certainly unfair. But you're the one who installed those instructions in that subconscious filing cabinet. So that becomes empowering because that means you're the one who can change it. You don't have to look outside of yourself. The placebo effect is very real and you're allowed to tap into it.
So this is where you quietly reinforce the boundaries with educational, non-diagnosing, non-miracle claims around hypnotherapy, making sure that the person is feeling safe and centered and able to work through and recognize the patterns that have come as a result of their trauma, whether that be current or past. And I want to look at what's really real for caregivers: the appointment rooms, hospital corridors, the phone calls, the meetings with service providers. Caregivers often say, my brain disappears in the room or my mind goes blank. Why does that happen, and what's going on psychologically and subconsciously that situation happens?
There's 8 billion of us on this planet. There's not one size fits all or one explanation that fits everybody's situation. But in terms of a situation where they may start feeling the stress and the anxiety, it's a physical response to that warning siren going off. Instead of a big siren or big strobe lights or anything, you're getting that feeling state. But the issue is the defense armoring, the defense mechanism of the body is now pulling in a lot of that energy. That's why, irritable bowel syndrome, IBS, one of the biggest causes, main causes, majority of causes of irritable bowel syndrome is hypervigilance, stress, and anxiety, because that energy is being pulled away from the digestive system to armor yourself, big muscles of your arms to fight, big muscles of your legs to escape. You are in danger now, according to your subconscious mind, real or imagined. You're in danger in this very moment. You don't need to digest that sandwich so you have energy in 7 hours. You're in danger right now. You don't need to fight that sickness, that common cold. So right now, because that's tomorrow's problem. You're in danger right now. So let's make sure we live to tomorrow. And they'll turn down the power of the immune system to use that energy somewhere else. This body of ours and this skull of ours can only hold so much blood supply and energy. So it gets diverted where needed. But one of the issues around when you're that whole mind going blank is that we actually prevent ourselves from breathing well. So oftentimes when somebody gets into the stress response or that fight or flight response, he starts shallow breathing. And the lungs are very huge. Lungs are big. The heart's about the size of your fist or something like that. The stomach's not that much bigger. The lungs are huge. We need that much oxygen. This brain of ours, it's about 2% of our body mass, about 3 pounds. I don't know what that is in metrics, but 3 pounds of our overall body weight. And yet it's taking 20% of the energy and 20% of the oxygen we breathe in. And so if you're not breathing well, people in fear and anxiety may even hold their breath and hold their breath. Well, you're not sending the nutrients and the fuel and the oxygen your brain needs for optimum levels of operation. Now, it's something like 30 to 35 days without food and you pass away. It's like 4 or 5 days without water and you pass away. But it's like 5-6 minutes without oxygen, you're unconscious. 8-9 minutes, you have permanent brain damage. 10-11 minutes, you're passed. You have minutes. Now, if you don't have a glass of water today, that's not great, but you're going to be okay. If you're on a fast for health reasons or spiritual reasons, great, that's wonderful. But if you're not breathing well, your brain is not getting the actual energy and nutrients it needs. So it may actually start shutting organs down to transfer that energy up to the brain so you can actually operate. And if you're holding your breath, you're not breathing deeply enough, you're not getting that oxygen, your brain starts to panic. And the feeling state of panic is anxiety. And so you kind of get that tunnel vision. And so one of the greatest ways, and I know this is obnoxious to say this to people who struggle with anxiety or fear, but one of the best things you can do is a deep breath. I know it's, again, obnoxious to tell somebody, you just take a deep breath. But literally, what your brain is starving for is oxygen. And that'll start kicking in the more rational, calm thinking if you give it what it needs, which is breath. So expanding your abdomen, flattening out that diaphragm so you get air into the bottom of your lungs, just a deep breath in. We also have this vagus nerve. Probably you've talked about that on the show before at some points. A lot have been written about the vagus nerve over the last decade or so. It's such an important part of the parasympathetic nervous system, the relaxation response. Sympathetic nervous system, the stress response, fight or flight response, parasympathetic. And, this is that thing where you touch a hot pot, a signal goes up a nerve into your brain, tells you you're touching a hot pot, let it go. It goes back down your arm, you let it go. Body talking to the brain, talking to mind. Well, the 10th cranial nerve is the vagus nerve. Vagus is Latin for wanderer because it attaches to your eyes and to the ears and muscles of your jaw, goes past your vocal cords, attaches to heart, to lungs, and to the gut. Big part of the parasympathetic nervous system. You take a deep breath in, fill up your lungs, fill up your abdomen, exhale it out. You actually stimulate the vagus nerve, therefore activate the parasympathetic. So this isn't difficult, but it's one of those things where it's like, you got to do it. And so when you find yourself in one of those situations, a wonderful thing to do, feel your feet grounded on the floor and just start taking deep breaths in. Another thing is we have we get that tunnel vision because, you're out in the woods, you're out here in Alaska, here in America, and you turn the corner, there's that grizzly bear there. You're going to have tunnel vision on that bear. Then you're going to tunnel vision where you're running to, what tree you're going to climb. Well, another aspect of this work is if you sense yourself in that stress and that tunnel vision, and maybe your mind's going blank, things like focus on a spot like across from you. Maybe there's a picture or a painting, a window. Maybe there's a spot on the pattern in the drywall, a shadow, a spot of light. Focus on something with that tunnel vision. You can do this with your hands for practice because you might not want to do this in a meeting at work or something, but you can do this if you're maybe by yourself, or who cares? Maybe you don't care if people see you do this, but with your hands in front of you, just start widening your hands. So you're expanding your peripheral vision by trying to keep your eyesight as best you can peripherally on your hands moving backwards. And if you're just listening to the audio, I'm just kind of moving my hands back to the side of my head, like towards my ears. And that's going to increase your wide vision, getting you out of that tunnel vision. So it's going to start resetting the nervous system. And guess what? The vagus nerve's attached to the eyes. That's why they say that EDMR work and things, one of the ways they think it works so well for people and helping them release trauma is that by closing the eyes, one, you're signaling the brain that you're safe because there's no danger to look at. But as you move the eyes around, not only creating that bilateral stimulation, so you start operating these different parts of the brain, but you're activating the vagus nerve. You activate the vagus nerve, you stimulate the vagus nerve, you activate the parasympathetics. All these things, when you're breathing in, and you can exhale with a sigh, like a loud hum. Like on the exhale, you're getting rid of all the carbon dioxide and the gases and toxins and trash and the garbage. But on the exhale, if you exhale out of your mouth with an audible sigh, you're, of course, vibrating your vocal cords, but you're also sympathetically vibrating the vagus nerve. Sympathetically vibrate the vagus nerve, you stimulate the vagus nerve, you activate the parasympathetic. So you start stacking these things, closing your eyes, so moving your eyes up and down, left, right. As you breathe in, you start focusing on your feet on the floor, and you start grounding yourself, centering yourself, and you turn off that. It starts turning off that stress response, or at least like the volume knob on the stereo, you turn it from 10 maybe down to 2. And so you can operate in a more resourceful and resilient way.
And when you're talking then about breath work, vagus nerve, our nervous system, being able to reset from fight, flight, freeze, and fawn, as caregivers specifically in those hard rooms when our mind does go blank, that's the, I guess, signal that we aren't breathing properly, that we have gone into that phase. And by pausing just for a moment, the beauty of breath work is that it's personal. Nobody needs to know about it. If you're in a space where you can't hum, like breathing out and making a noise, that's totally okay. As long as you stop breathing up here and you start circulating, you'll re-access those amazing memory moments that you have to help you in this situation. And I guess a big theme in our community is fear of retaliation or fear of being labeled difficult if we speak up. How does that kind of fear condition the nervous system over time if we are unable to put things in place to support us?
And again, 8 billion people in the world, we all have reactions and responses to things that are scary in different ways. Some people just push through it. Some people just, I don't care what they think about me, put all the red flags in the folder that you want. Other people, because maybe it was unsafe to speak up and advocate for themselves as a child or as a teenager, that had serious repercussions that were traumatic, that there may be some conditioning and some instructions and computer programming in the subconscious mind that says, okay, well, that was really unsafe when you would speak up for yourself or advocate for yourself. And so, yeah, probably I would say, yeah, I totally understand why it'd be fearful around doing that, especially with an authority figure wearing a white coat or, somebody with a clipboard and a pen or something. And so this was something that you weren't born with. Again, there's probably innate fears that we're born with around scorpions and rattlesnakes and grizzly bears and things and fire and things like this. But in terms of like an issue, like let's say just this is kind of broad, but just as an example, fear of flying. Nobody's born with fear of flying. People can get it in various different ways. So there's really no one size fits all kind of technique around that. Because somebody, flown for 30 years and then has a really bad turbulence over the Atlantic flying to London and never wants to fly again. Or somebody's in a big plane, somebody's in a small plane. I worked with somebody who had never even been to an airport, never been on a flight, but she heard her parents talk about a really bad airplane crash near their home. And that's how she became afraid of flying. So these are all different ways of, it's a very specific issue of coming to it. So in terms of what you're talking about, these instructions to create patterns and reactions to something are different for people. So the techniques and tools, but the idea around you're allowed to reprogram any way you want. If you want more confidence, strength, and power, you're very confident and strong and empowered in a lot of ways. You may not think that about yourself, but you are. And just to be kind of broad and maybe a little silly about it, but you're very confident you can tie your shoes. And that may be something, oh yeah, of course I can tie my shoes. It's like, yeah, but there was a time when you couldn't do that. You weren't confident about it at all, but you're confident about it now and you think it's kind of silly because you do it over and over again, or zip up your jacket or boil water to make pasta or something. Yeah, you're very confident, strong, and empowered in that. Okay, well, how about we take that feeling state in your body of where you feel that confidence, or confidence that you can play the guitar, or you can dance, or whatever it is that you do well. And there are things that you do well. Let's take that confidence and now let's start associating it with something maybe you don't feel very confident about. Again, something broad, like giving a speech at the big conference or the big meeting or something. That's one of people's big fears, public speaking. So let's take something you're very confident about and let's start associating it with this thing they're not confident about. Now, there may also need to be associated work like practicing speaking in front of people. That's a skill people need. Ask any or hear the top speakers, Tony Robbins or whoever, to talk about that and they say, oh, they were terrible and didn't do very well when they first, okay, well, there's some practice with that. But the confidence to get up in front of people can certainly be there. And one of the ways you can do this is by anchoring. And here's another tool that people can use. Now, an anchor you can use any one of the five senses, what you see, hear, taste, touch, and smell. Smell is a very great anchor for memory. A smell will remind you of your grandmother's kitchen or your garden, or maybe as a kid, you went to a lavender farm. You remember the smell of the lavender and it brings you back to being 10 years old on this field trip with your friends. Disneyland is very great at this. Anybody's been to Disneyland, Pirates of the Caribbean or something, they have these particular smells and you smell that, it brings you back to a certain time, a place, your favorite restaurant, your favorite cafe, a cup of coffee, something else. You can do it with music. It reminds you of school, the wedding, family vacation you took, summer vacation. One song reminds you of a particular time in school because that was the song of summer. Your particular color might remind you of being a kid because that color is the color of the toy or a jacket or a book cover or something. But you can also do it with touch. And one of the easiest things to do is press your finger and thumb together. This is a Pavlovian effect in that Pavlov, if anybody has a dog or cat, it's feeding time. They come running. You hear the bag. They hear the bag open. They hear the can open. They see the food. They smell the food. This is causing the digestive system, a physical response in the body, digestive system to turn on. If you have a big dog, Great Dane or something, as Pavlov did, they'll start to actually drool because the digestive system is turning on, more saliva. All this is causing hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of millions of brain cells to fire at the same time, turning on the digestive system, registering the food as sight and smell, and even hearing the bag open. Hundreds of millions of neurons are now connecting together. Neurons that fire together will wire together. Brain cells that fire at the same time will connect together because the brain wants fast, efficient communication. Well, Pavlov's like, yeah, brain cells that fire together, wire together. I wonder if I ring a bell because that has nothing to do with being fed. It's supposed to work, so let's see. So he experimented, he practiced with that. Actually, another million neurons is firing to register a sound of bell, connecting to the digestive system being turned on because it's all the other things happening. He could be on a walk with his dog, ring the bell, and the dog starts salivating with no food around. Pavlovian effect, because you're anchoring it to what you do with touch. So the million neurons firing to press your finger and thumb together can link and connect and anchor to the million neurons firing for that confidence and that strength and that power, or that peace and that calm. And so if you practice with this, let's say you take some time every day to create peace and calm, maybe by listening to a recording of those binaural beats on the headphones, or walking in nature, or just sitting in the sun, or whatever it is, listening to music, whatever it is for you. And pressing your finger and thumb together when you're in that calm, peaceful state, even just for 5 minutes. If you only have 10-minute break, find a thing you can do to really create peace and calm. Meditation, or pretending you're on a all-inclusive resort on the moon. Mind can't tell the difference between what's real and what's imagined. As you create that peaceful state, press your finger and thumb together. So when you're in a place where maybe you don't usually feel calm and peaceful, press your finger and thumb together, and that feeling state will come right back to you. Watching a funny movie on TV, hanging out with a friend at a cafe, press your finger and thumb together. And you can do that with confidence. You feel confident about tying your shoes. You feel confident you can walk down the street. You feel confident you can drink a glass of water. Press your finger and thumb together. And then as you're giving that speech, pressing your finger and thumb together that nobody can see you do, because it's very discreet, that confidence returns because neurons that fire together wire together. As you're taking a deep breath in, as you're moving your eyes up and down all around, these tools and techniques you can use to get to a point where pressing your finger and thumb together will bring that feeling state of peace and calm and relaxation back to you. If you could practice that, and that's kind of the thing, isn't it? It's just practicing and training your nervous system to do this. So when it gets overwhelmed and in emergency fight or flight, and you get grounded, you get centered, and now with a rational, calm brain and calm mind, you can deal with the issues. Instead of reacting, you can now respond in a resourceful and resourceful and resilient way.
So we're talking about micro moments that we can habit stack into experiences that are positive and not in that state of crisis. And examples of those that I can think of from listening to you would be if you love having a morning cup of coffee or a cup of tea, and you take that big deep breath in and you smell the coffee, and whilst you're doing that, pressing your fingers together, opening your lungs, and you're habit stacking not one, not two, but possibly three by moving your eyes and also engaging in those senses when you're calm, so that when you're in that state of crisis or that state of fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, you're able to bring your higher thinking back on faster by engaging and resetting your vagus nerve, resetting your nervous system, so that you can tell that you're not in a state of needing to save your life, because that's where we get to when our nervous system is not regulated. We feel like we're under attack. And I really appreciate that you've given us those micro tools that can be integrated throughout the day and reinforced, so that when we're in those moments, we can have subtle, supportive strategies that provide caregivers with space not to perform, but to be present in those hard rooms. And I always love to end our conversations with this one question. If you could give caregivers one sentence to carry into hard rooms, what would it be?
Wonderful. You have the power and ability to control your nervous system. It may seem like that's out of your ability to do that because you're reacting to a situation. When you realize that you can take control and respond, now this, like anything, want to get better at, any sort of skill may require some practice. So doing it in a safe place first, like your living room or sitting in the kitchen table looking out at the garden with a cup of coffee or a cup of tea, a safe place to do that. And then move that feeling state that you've anchored to your finger into that state so that you're prepared for that situation that may be disconcerting. I think a lot of people just assume that, well, when I take a test, I'm going to get anxious. I get on that airplane flight, I'm going to be anxious. I walk into that doctor's office waiting room or the actual examination room, and I'm just going to be anxious. That's just the way it is. That's the way I am. That's the way I'm wired. It's like, well, you weren't wired like that at birth. You had to learn. You learned that somewhere, maybe trained yourself for it. And so you can train yourself for something else. Now, I'm not saying that this is instantaneous, but you can practice this. And it's not going to take years and years and decades and decades. We're talking months of maybe even weeks to practice being in a calm center state, but it's that intention of doing it. And why, again, whether it's a finger and a thumb or it's to a song or to, a smell or a color or something else, a certain jacket you're wearing, or I don't know. But anchoring it to something that's easy to remember to do and easy to do, even discreet. And that's why I like finger and thumb, practicing that and putting yourself in state. It's just like an actor walking on stage or a musician, singer walking out on stage. You're going to put himself in state, like Tony Robbins. If you saw that documentary about him, I'm Not Your Guru, he puts himself in state before walking on stage. This guy has been doing this personal development work, his self-help work for 40 years. There's no probably bigger expert on personal development and becoming your best self than Tony Robbins. And yet he still puts himself in state due to the situation that he needs to be in. And if he's walking out on stage in front of 10,000 people in an arena, he puts himself in the state of being that Tony Robbins. And so walking into that doctor's office may be different than walking into the cafe or restaurant with your friend or hanging out with family at home watching a movie. These are all you. They're different parts of you, and you need to wear that different hat. And so walking into that appointment or that office or that doctor's examination room, you may need to be a strong, empowered person. Imagine yourself as Joan of Arc, or the superhero is that you align with. Imagine yourself as that person. How are you going to walk differently if you felt that you were that person? How would you breathe? Pretend you're that person. The mind can't tell the difference between what's real and what's imagined. And put yourself in the state of the person you need to be in that situation. Make sure you take some self-care time every day. All of us, not just people who care for others, care workers, all of us need to be taking some self-care time every day. It's just got 5 minutes, even just a hot shower, and letting it go and releasing and letting go. It's just like you got to fill your car up with gasoline or windshield wiper fluid and all that stuff. Air in the tires. You got to take care of your car. I know people take better care of their cars than they do of themselves. You got to give yourself that time to release and let go of the stressors and tensions, as well as remember the strong, empowered person that you are and the places where that needs to happen the most. So I think that was a long answer to a short question, but you're allowed to become the person you want to be, and you have the wiring within the brain and the ability to create the mindset of that person.
Thank you very much, Craig. I appreciate that. And I want to ask, where is the best place for our listeners to find you and learn more?
Well, something about what we talked about today resonate with you. Maybe you're noticing patterns around stress or anxiety that you feel stuck. I'm happy to talk with people over the phone, over Zoom. And if you go to my website, craigmeriwether.com, I know there's so many different ways to spell Meriwether. But if you went to release the past, and you can find out more about me, more about hypnotherapy and the work I do. There's a free ebook about the power behind your beliefs that goes into more detail about what we've talked about today. And certainly happy to answer anybody's questions around over email or a Zoom call or something about this work and how it might help you.
Fantastic. Craig, thank you. This was such a steady conversation. I know it will land with caregivers who are doing their best and still feel like their nervous system is running the show in hard rooms. Today, we've talked about hypnosis, what it is and isn't, why caregivers can blank or go into survival mode under pressure, why the crash often comes later, a few small tools to support your body and mind before, during, and after the moments that matter. If you're listening and you've been blaming yourself for your stress response, I want you to hear this. Your nervous system isn't failing you. It's protecting you. And with the right support, you can build more steadiness, one small next step at a time. To everyone listening, thank you for spending this time with us. You don't have to hold it all alone. I'm Michelle, and this is Radiant Moments Caregiver Oasis. Until next time, take gentle care of your radiant moments and of yourself.